you need to establish, before you start, what are your prime control areas for any given area, and then identify controls governing several areas, because you're looking for evidence that those controls work or don't work. And there's a problem, because many of the controls that we rely on are preventative controls which do not leave behind evidence for you to go and analyze. So look for controls that provide evidence and do not try to prove a negative. There is no evidence, therefore the control does not work. Or there is no evidence, therefore the control works. All you can say if there's no evidence is there is no evidence, therefore there is no evidence. Our primary areas of concern, when you're looking at any kind of computer records or computer system, there's a huge problem, because modern computer systems are complex, and the complex ones cannot be recreated manually. So if something goes wrong, it's gone wrong, and it's gone wrong drastically. And many computer records are intelligible only to computers. So you can't just look at the printouts, because half of the information never comes out on a printout. You're going to have to look inside the box. Most computers allow multiple access. So you can't go back to the old days when you used to have input documents and you could go check the input documents. There may be no documents. This could be someone phoning in with an order which gets entered straight into the computer, and there is no documentary support. You get two kinds of users. One says computers can be trusted, and they check nothing. The other says you can't trust computers, and they check everything. Neither of which is correct. And just remember, when you're dealing with a computer system, to err is human. To really mess it up, you need a computer. So when we talk disasters, we mean disasters. Remember also, when you're using these tools, that application audit tools are not always CATs. You get different kinds of CAT, and a CAT is simply any tangible aid that assists the auditor. So I've got tools to obtain information. IDEA is a tool to obtain information if I use it that way. I get tools to evaluate controls. If I'm looking for the evidence, if the evidence on that control exists inside the box, I can extract the evidence to prove the control or not prove the control. If it doesn't exist inside the box, then I may have to go and look at documentary support. I may have to go and interview people. The fact that IDEA doesn't find it inside the computer doesn't mean it exists. Maybe it never went into the computer. I can have tools to verify that the controls exist. I can use, and you'll see later on in the series, that I can use IDEA to reproduce calculations and verify that the controls and calculations work as applied. And I can use my automated tools, the IDEAs of this world. For obtaining information, without the computer, we can still go and interview people. A lot of auditors, particularly IT auditors, get the impression that once you've got generalized audit software, all of these other techniques fall away and we don't use them anymore. Not true. You're going to have to go through this stage before you can decide what it is you want to look at with your CATs. So we'll interview people, we'll use questionnaires, we can use analytical audit flowcharts, and the one I happen to use is Visio. Again, it's a computer-assisted audit tool. It's not an interrogation tool, but it can help me map out particularly control flow within an organization. I can do documentation review, look for signatures, etc. Now, again, in a lot of modern systems, that documentation has been scanned into electronic digital form, so the documentation review may well involve looking at the information. But that documentation, when you scan in a document, you can scan it in basically two ways. You can scan it in as a graphic image, or you can scan it in as text. If it's in as text, I can interrogate it using IDEA. If it's in as a graphic image, it's basically a picture of text, and I cannot scan it using IDEA. There is software, for example, which can take a scanned image and extract the text from it, and I can then analyze that with IDEA. So you're never stuck. There's never only one way to do it. There are multiple automated ways of doing things. We've got application control matrices, which look at components' concerns in order to determine whether controls are adequate or inadequate. For verification, some auditors are still working on the basis you can test around the computer. And for certain criteria, you can do that. If I want to check that all transactions were authorized, then what I can do is I can take a listing of all transactions and simply go and check the authorization on every single one. I can run test data through a computer system to see if 2 + 2 = 4. I can reperform those key functions. I can reprocess high-value items, low-value items, medium-value items to see what comes out the other end. But at some point in time, I'm going to use my automated tools. And again, there are different varieties there. When you're looking at running test data through a system, your problem is how do you ensure that every possible combination of data has been tried? And one of the ways to do that is to use an automated tool called a test data generator. I can use my flowcharting packages. I mentioned Visio. I used to use one called Flowcharting 3. I can use specialized audit software. Now, specialized audit software has got some advantages and disadvantages. Typically, it's used when you want to do special things or you want to interrogate information which is not in a standard form. Let me give you an example. If I want to interrogate an IBM Xeos operating system, one of the files I would be interested in is a log file called the SMF log, the Systems Management Facility log. But there's a problem because all of the records on that have got different file layouts. Now that's not a problem in its own right because IDEA can handle multiple record layouts, no problem at all. But it's a variable record layout within a variable block. And IDEA cannot handle variable blocks, nor can ACL, nor can most of the standard audit software. I can do it by extracting the information from SMF and putting it into a fixed block records, variable length records, but within fixed blocks, and then I can interrogate it. Or I can use a specialized piece of software called the SMF Analyzer, which is not written for the auditors, it's written for the systems programmer, but nevertheless I can use it. And it then becomes specialized audit software. That's all it does, it interrogates SMF. It can't interrogate anything else. I can buy specialized audit software, or I can write specialized audit software, or pay someone to write it for me. If I want to go into a particular file structure or do something strange that I can't do with my normal software that I've got, the problem is if you're getting someone to write it, it's going to be expensive. If you write it yourself, it's going to be expensive because you are an expensive resource. And whether you write it or somebody else writes it, you're going to have to test it to make sure that it does do what you think it does and what you want it to do. So specialized audit software, under certain circumstances, can be very powerful. And under other circumstances, it can be a damn nuisance because it's so expensive, and typically you use it for this one audit, and if you ever come back to do the same thing, they'll have changed the audit objectives, or they'll have changed the record layout, or they'll have changed something that means take what you did before, throw it away and start again. You can also get specialized audit software that looks at data in a different way. Again, one that's not specifically written for auditors, one called Clementine. There's another one called NetMap, and what they do is they look at relationships among data, and they map it out for you so that you can see that this is connected to that, is connected to this, is connected to that, is connected to that. It doesn't do the kind of standard interrogation that you can do using IDEA, but IDEA doesn't do the kind of mapping you can do with that. So what is it you want to do? You choose the tool for the job. Utility programs. These are the standard programs that come with the operating environment. And it could be, for example, Windows. If I want to know whether a file exists on the system or not, I'm going to use search. I'm not going to use IDEA. If I want to copy something, I can bring it into IDEA and then write it out to a file somewhere else. Or I can say copy. So never forget that you've got a whole pile of utilities that came with the machine that allow you to back up, copy, print, restore, etc. And then we have the generalized audit softwares of this world. The generalized audit softwares, much cheaper to implement than specialized. Specialized can do anything that you want it to do, but it's going to cost you. Your maintenance cost, if it's not the same next year that you want to do, either you throw it away and start again, or you're going to have to change everything you did last year. You're going to have some kind of specific IS skills, either to write it or to verify it. And as I say there, a high degree of obsolescence when you're using that kind of thing. Generalized audit software, on the other hand, come with prefabricated audit tests. And that's terrific, but there are limitations within that as well. For example, we looked at sampling within IDEA, and I told you about the 3 different types. Now, those are the 3 types of sampling that auditors most commonly use. But if I am doing something strange and exotic, like I'm looking at a very low population size, or I'm looking at an area which is not amenable to that kind of testing because it does not have a normal distribution, a statistically normal distribution, then I may have to use a non-parametric test, a Kruskal-Wallis test, or a Mann-Whitney test, whatever it happens to be. Those are not there in ACL, and they're not there in IDEA, and they're not there in most of the generalized audit software that you can buy out there. For that, I'm going to have to go and buy specialized software for interrogation statistically. I happen to use one called NCSS, the number crunching statistical system, but there's a stack of stuff out there. And this will get heavily into deep statistics. But once again, you need to know what you're looking for, you need to know the appropriate test, and when you've done it, you need to know what the answer means. Never forget that Excel has got a whole pile of additional statistical techniques where you can do things like regression analysis, correlation coefficients, etc., which you cannot do with generalized audit software normally. Having said that, you'll probably find that the next release will come out with all those things in it. But generally, you've got those prefabricated audit tests. Each use is a one-off. You use it, you throw it away. You saw me do those interrogations and throw away the files because it's so fast. If I need to do it again, I'll do it again. If I need to do it again but slightly differently, I'll do it again but slightly differently. The cost to run a test is comparatively low, so I can use it once, throw away. I've got direct control. I don't need to go to IT and say, please could you write me a program that will extract this. Oh, it's in the wrong order. Please can you give me it in a different order? Because everything is pre-done for me, the development cost of developing an interrogation is very low, and it's very fast to implement. Okay. Click, 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 go. And that's it done. We use it for things like detective examination of the file. So I have a file and I want to see if anyone has negative credit limits, if we have negative stock in store, if we have duplicate invoices, if we have missing purchase orders. Anything that I want to look at with a detective view in mind, tell me what the question is and we'll figure out how to inquire. I can verify processing controls. If I know that this is the way that a discount is supposed to be calculated, I can use my audit software to calculate the discount in that way and then compare it to the discount that's on file and say, are they different? Show me any that are different. If so, I want to know why this isn't adding up correctly. I can do file interrogations and simply say, show me the high value items, show me the high risk customers, show me the high volume customers. And an interesting one, management inquiries. Be aware and beware of management inquiries. I do know one head of internal audit for a car manufacturer who got fed up because he kept getting management coming and saying, we need to know if the following is true, and they would give them an interrogation and they would say, yeah, sure, no problem, we'll do that for you. Bang, and they did it. Right, can you let me have that every week? Hang on a second, I'm not auditing the controls, I'm now becoming the control. There's something wrong here. And what they discovered was that the management had gone to IT and said, we need to know this information. And IT had said, yeah, not a problem. We can write a program that will do that for you. The cost to your cost center will be $1,000, and it will take probably a week to do it. We should be able to do that in about 2 months' time. And they said, really? I'll tell you what, forget it just now, and they went to audit. And our audit became an alternate data analysis area for management. And he got fed up with this, so one time when they came and asked him to do it, they said, okay, we'll do it, and they did it once. And they said, can you do it from now on? And he said, no, but I'll give you the software, and you can do it from now on. So they had 3 copies, which they bought for their 3 IT auditors, and they bought another 10 copies and gave it to management and said, if it's in there, you can extract with this. So be careful that you don't become an alternate data mining house for management. Types of audit software, different kinds that you can get. You can get program generators that will generate programs in Pascal, C++, in the old days even COBOL. And then you can take the source code and amend it and make it more efficient or whatever you want to do with it. You get macro languages where you give it an instruction and it will bust it out into a whole string of instructions, which is what you saw happening within IDEA. This is the script that it created. You can get audit-specific tools. You can get data downloaders of different kinds. And of course, you've got all of the standard micro-based software like your Excels, like Access, anything that you can buy that you would not necessarily normally use for an audit, but nevertheless can be used. If you've already got it and you've already bought it, go ahead and use it. Some people will turn around and say to me, why should I buy IDEA or ACL when I've already got Excel? What can IDEA do for me that I can't do in Excel? And the answer is probably very little. But if you're going to do it in Excel, it will take you a day. to set up the macros, etc. If you're going to do it in IDEA, it's going to take you 10 minutes. And that's the kind of differential. All I can tell you is that internal audit at Microsoft went and bought generalized audit software. Now, if you work for Microsoft and you want to buy a piece of software which is not Microsoft software, you better have a damn good reason. And they were given permission to go ahead and do it. Our software functions that we can do our normal file access, we can do our arithmetic operations, we can add things up, we can subtract things, divide things through, calculate averages, calculate values. We can do logic operations, if, and, or, else, not. You saw that when we did that. We want to filter it for the branch code equal to 2, country equal to South Africa, credit limit greater than whatever. We can update. Now that's an interesting thought. You can update. I said to you that with audit software you cannot update the live data, and that's true. But I can take a record this time and save that file, and next year I can compare the two. And I can produce a variation report that will show me how it's been updated. I can produce output going to printouts, output going to graphs. We can do our statistics. We can do file comparisons. And there's all kinds of graphics are built into the system. Which CAT do I need? Depends. Depends on the audit objective and the audit technique. Start off with what do you want to know. Then you look at where is the evidence. Then you decide how am I going to get to the evidence. If the evidence is in somebody's brain, I will go and interview the person. If it's a criminal, I might interrogate the person. I've chosen my appropriate technique. Now I can choose the tool. If I'm going to interview them, do I do it face-to-face? Do I do it by telephone? Do I do it using Skype? How am I going to interview them? In the same way as if I have decided that the information is inside the computer, how am I going to get to it? Now I can choose the appropriate tool. But I still need to decide what is it that I want to know. Am I trying to verify the processing? Or am I trying to verify the results of the processing? Do I want to be sure that when a transaction goes through a computer system, that the computer system is working correctly, because I can do that using my CATs? Or do I want to prove that everything that went in came out and came out correctly, because I can do that with CATs? Or everything that came out came from a valid input, because I can do that with CATs? So I need to know what it is that I want to know in order to get it right. Common pitfalls: getting the wrong file. You go and extract the file and you find that you're not looking at today's file, you're looking at yesterday's file, or last week's file, or last year's file, or a test file, or a file that somebody gave you which only contains half of the information. Getting the wrong layout. The nice thing about extracting from Access, from an ODBC compliant database, from Excel, is you get the structure of the data with the data. The structure of the data is what's called metadata, is data describing the data. And when you're dealing with those and you bring them down, you get the two together. I mentioned to you ODBC. ODBC is the standard for open database connectivity, which all relational databases are supposed to comply with. Now, to access those, all I need is on my computer, my PC, I simply need the appropriate ODBC drivers for that particular database. And if I've got SQL, I can load on those drivers. If I've got Oracle, I can load on the Oracle drivers. Once those drivers are on, then all I have to do is say this is coming from an ODBC database, and it will say which one. And I can say I want it from MS Access, or I want it from Oracle. And it will take those drivers and it will say, okay, these are the Oracle databases you've got. Which one are you interested in? I'm interested in the sales one. Fine. Here are the tables within that sales one. We've got sales, we've got customers, we've got destination depots, whatever it happens to be. Which tables are you interested in? And you can extract that. Okay, so you get it, the layout automatically. If you're getting it from a text file, if you're getting it from a print file, you've got to have your hands on that right layout before you can actually determine and direct the computer. This field is there from that character to that character. It is numeric. There are 2 decimal places, etc. In the same way as getting the wrong layout, because the layout is out of date, the documentation can be out of date. And if the documentation is out of date, you might be trying to prove that the system does something that it doesn't do anymore, or that it does in a different way. And you can therefore run all the cats that you like, and at the end of a week you can turn around and say the system is deficient in the following areas. And as soon as you produce that, someone's going to say, but we changed it 6 months ago, it doesn't do it that way anymore. So that documentation has got to be up to date. Prejudging results can be death to the auditor. When you decide that what you're looking for is a fraud and it should look like this, and you find a record that looks like that, therefore automatically it is a fraud. Never believe what the first printout tells you, particularly if you wrote the program yourself. And that brings us